Salvador, which of course is exactly where the Trump administration deported him to in violation of that court order. Brian, in 2019, first of all, who was president? My recollection is that was Donald Trump. Also, if they had all this great incriminating evidence back in 2019, I mean, the conspiracy was up and running for the first 3 years of the Trump administration by then, they would have presented it in court, but nothing. So now let's move forward in time to when the Trump administration deported Abrego Garcia just a few months ago. Brian, come on. Don't you think if they had now amassed all of this dramatically incriminating evidence showing Abrego Garcia was running this conspiracy for 10 years, do you really think they would have just deported him to El Salvador and let him get away with all of it just a few months ago? This stinks. This, to me, feels like, smells like an after-the-fact bootstrapping act of desperation to try to save face and convince people that Abrego Garcia was really a criminal all along. Well, then the first question is to the Trump administration, then why in the hell have you dropped the ball for years over and over and over again? The good news, Brian, is when he gets back into court, Abrego Garcia, and the government, the prosecutors, DOJ has to put up or shut up, it will be very interesting to see if this case falls apart, which it very well might, or if they really have the goods dating back to 2016.
And I want to dig into that in a moment, but first, isn't it interesting that the whole purpose of the outcry over this case was because he wasn't given due process? And so I think what you're saying is exactly the fact that if they have all of this incriminating evidence and you know what Pam Bondi is claiming when she comes out and says that he was engaged in some big trafficking ring, wouldn't that be the first thing that they would put forward? Why deprive him of due process if you've got such a home run case that only suddenly happens to show up, you know, in June, several months after he's been deported, and you've deprived him of due process all of that time? If you have a home run case like Pam Bondi is claiming the DOJ has, why in the world would you hide that and not put that out front and center, especially for months and months and months, as even the Supreme Court has to rule unanimously against this administration that he has to be sent back?
Brian, there's no good answer to that question. They didn't do it in 2016. They didn't do it in 2019. They didn't do it as a matter of months ago when they deported him. And the whole time this case has been litigated in front of Judge Sines in Maryland, and she has been taking the DOJ lawyers to task. They didn't come up with any of this. But now, all of a sudden, again, it feels like to save face, they have conjured up all of this incriminating evidence. Well, it will soon be put to the test. And let's be clear, they still unconstitutionally deported Abrego Garcia. They sent him to that prison in El Salvador without giving him any notice or opportunity to be heard, as is required by the Fifth Amendment's due process clause. That is something they will have to carry through this litigation, and it will come back to haunt them.
Glenn, the question then becomes, now that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is going to be back in the United States, he's gotten out of CCOT, the only thing preventing him from having his freedom is the fact that he's now going to be contending with these new indictments at the hands of the DOJ, what it seems like may very well be trumped up charges as some after-the-fact pretense to kind of exact some retribution against him. But if the DOJ loses, does that mean that Garcia is then free to walk, a free man in this country?
Yeah, a couple of things to unpack. First of all, I suspect at his arraignment, which is the first court hearing any defendant gets after he or she has been indicted. At his arraignment hearing, I am certain that Pam Bondi's DOJ lawyers will ask the judge to detain Abrego Garcia pending trial.
I believe they've already signaled that they're going to do exactly that.
And then it will be up to the judge to assess if he is detention eligible, if the government can make its case that he is a danger to the community, that he is a flight risk. And listen, in the event, he is also subject to potential deportation after he gets his due process rights guaranteed by the Constitution. It could very well be that he's eligible for deportation? We don't know because he didn't get his due process rights honored the first time. And if he is deportation eligible, that will be a separate basis apart from this criminal indictment that could give the judge the authority to detain him pending deportation. So lots of moving pieces now in two separate but related matters, the criminal prosecution on the new indictment and the deportation following the Constitution as they should have done in the first instance.
Glenn, what if it's discovered after all of this, let's say that the government's effort to hold these criminal charges against Kilmar Abrego Garcia fails, and it becomes clear enough that they're seeking political retribution against him? Is there some type of lawsuit that he can wage against the government for exactly that?
It's a big if, but the answer to your question is potentially. What would have to happen, in my opinion, is that once this indictment is put to the test, if the judge holds evidentiary hearings, motions hearings in the run-up to the trial, and a judge concludes, you know what, they really don't have the goods, and all of this was just a pretext to try to cover up their original unconstitutional conduct that they perpetrated against Abrego Garcia, the judge dismisses the case with prejudice. He finds vindictive and bad faith prosecution by Bondi's DOJ. That's a lot of ifs there. But if all of that comes to pass, then Abrego Garcia could very well have a case against the federal government for the unconstitutional, vindictive, and retributive conduct that it's taking against him.
What do you make of the fact that the Trump administration did opt to do what they themselves said there was no chance of them doing, which is actually facilitating the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia?
The first thing I would do is, if I were Abrego Garcia's lawyers in his deportation case in Maryland, I would file something with Judge Sines asking for further sanctions, summary judgment, and some penalties, perhaps contempt proceedings against the Trump administration and the DOJ lawyers who represented in court that it was impossible for the United States to facilitate the release and return of Abrego Garcia. That is now shown to be absolute and utter bullshit. And lawyers from the Department of Justice should not get away with spewing bullshit in court.
And what are the implications now for the other wrongly deported migrants? I know there's a number of other cases. There was the gay barber that was wrongly deported. There were, I think, something like 144 Venezuelans who were wrongly deported. So there's a lot of other cases that are ongoing that kind of live in this world. Does the fact that the Trump administration has done what it claimed it couldn't do by virtue of returning Garcia, does that have implications for these other cases where the government might have said the same thing?
It actually does. I believe it has direct implications because Abrego Garcia is actually the second person in rapid succession that the Trump administration has brought back to the United States after unconstitutionally deporting them. There is another gentleman, a Guatemalan, who was unlawfully deported to Mexico. And recently, the Trump administration facilitated his return. Now they've done it again for Abrego Garcia under admittedly different circumstances. So I think these DOJ lawyers are going to be hard-pressed to walk back into any of the courts around the country where these issues are being litigated, and they're being litigated all over the United States in federal district courts in various jurisdictions, and say, yeah, we just can't bring people back. It's not possible. It's not feasible. It's too cumbersome. Judges are going to say, yeah, you know what? That argument doesn't fly, so you might want to move on to your next argument.
Well, look, this is a major case and a lot to look forward to in terms of what the administration opts to try and do in terms of locking Kilmar Abrego Garcia up as he awaits his actual trial. So we'll see what happens as soon as this arraignment takes place, which I presume is going to be within 24 to 48 hours, if I'm not mistaken. And then obviously the trial from there is going to have huge implications as well, not just on these other cases that are ongoing, but Trump's whole deportation agenda more broadly. So for those who are watching, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. It's the best way to support our work and the best way to support independent media more broadly. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.